Good evening and welcome back to my calm and steady channel. I'm Craig Dempsey. Great to be with you all again. Tonight I actually want to talk about something most men never tend to speak about openly, and it's the day everything collapsed. Not the dramatic version, not the shouting, smashing, chaos version, but the quiet one. The one where something inside you just drops and you realise the illusion has broken. You see, there is always a moment. Sometimes it's a phone call, a message. Sometimes it's a look across the room, or even a knock at the door. Sometimes it's sitting alone after everyone's gone, and the silence feels different. It's heavier. And you realise something isn't coming back. The relationship, the job, the version of you that you thought you were, and the security you believed you had. And you feel it in your chest first. Not panic, not rage, just a hollow shift, like the floor moved slightly. For some men, collapse is financial. It's the business failed. The redundancy call comes. The numbers don't add up anymore. For others, it's relational. The words "I'm done," or worse, silence. For some, it's public. An accusation, a humiliation, an exposure. And for many, it's eternal. You look in the mirror and you realise that you've been surviving for a long time, not living, but surviving. And here's what nobody tells men about collapse. And it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels confusing. You see, you wake up the next day and the world is still moving. People are still posting, still working, still laughing. And you're standing there thinking, how did everything change? And worse, why didn't I see it coming? See, collapse isn't the actual explosion, it's the exposure. It exposes what was already fragile. It exposes the things you ignored, the cracks you smoothed over, the tension you carried quietly, the compromises you made, the stress you normalized. Collapse doesn't create weakness. What it does is it actually reveals it. And that's hard to accept because most men pride themselves on holding things together. We hold the finances together. We hold the emotions in. We hold the image. We hold the responsibility until we can't. And when it falls apart, the shame is louder than the pain. And the thoughts, they come first. I should have handled it better. I should have seen it. I shouldn't have let it get this far. How did I lose control? But here's something important. Most collapse isn't about losing control. It's about carrying too much, too long. Without pause, without support, without regulation. When everything collapsed for me, it wasn't one thing. It was layers. Financial stress, emotional pressure, identity strain, reputation, security. It wasn't fireworks, it was erosion. And when it finally gave way, I didn't feel dramatic. I felt tired, exhausted in a way sleep doesn't just fix. That's something men don't talk about enough, and collapse often feels like exhaustion, not hysteria, just tired. And here's the part that matters most. The day everything collapses feels like the end. But it rarely is the end. It's exposure. It exposes where you were living in fear, where you were over-functioning, where you were ignoring your nervous system, where you were trying to prove something, where you were holding a role that wasn't sustainable. See, collapse removes illusion. It strips identity down to its base, and that's terrifying at first, because when identity gets stripped away, you're left asking, who am I without this relationship? Who am I without this job? Who am I without this addiction? Who am I without the image that I built? That's not a small question. For a man, that's a question that hits really deep. Because a lot of men build identity around function, provider, protector, fixer, the strong one, the dependable one, the one who doesn't break. So when collapse happens, it doesn't just take circumstances, it shakes identity. And that's why it feels so destabilizing. Let me say something important actually here. Collapse does not mean you failed as a man, okay? It means something unsustainable reached its limit. That's different, very different. There's a difference between moral failure and structural failure. Without repair, without adjustment, and eventually something gives. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. Here's what most people don't talk about. When everything collapses, the silence afterwards is loud. The phone stops ringing. The routine disappears. The identity you carried, gone. And you sit there thinking, how did my life get here? And your mind starts replaying everything, every decision, every argument. So if you're in that place right now, if something has ended, if something has fallen apart, if the version of you or your life you thought you had no longer exists, I want you to hear this carefully. Collapse is not humiliation. It's exposure. It exposes what wasn't sustainable. It exposes what you were tolerating. And it also exposes where you were surviving instead of living. It feels brutal, but exposure is honest. When my life collapsed, I thought I had failed as a partner, as a man, as a provider, as a father. But what I eventually understood slowly was this. It wasn't that I was finished, it was that the illusion was finished. And the illusions are exhausting to maintain. You don't realise how much energy you've been spending trying to hold everything together until it finally falls apart. And when it does, there's grief, there's anger, there's confusion. You see, there's moments where you just sit staring at a wall, but there's also something else. There's space to see clearly, space to rebuild honestly, space to ask, who am I now? Not who I was pretending to be, not who I needed to be to keep peace, not who I was trying to prove myself to be, but who am I without the noise? Now, that question feels terrifying at first, but it's also the beginning. And And here's the truth I wish someone had told me. You don't rebuild your life in a dramatic moment. You rebuild it in quiet decisions. You build it when you choose not to react. And you also rebuild it when you sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. You rebuild it even when you stop chasing clarity from people who won't give it. Collapse strips you back. But stripped back isn't destroyed. Stripped back is real. And real is where strength actually lives. So if you're in collapse right now, you're not behind, you're not weak, you're not finished, you're exposed. And exposure is the first honest step towards becoming steady. And that is what my channel is about. Not hype, not revenge, not proving anyone wrong, but becoming calm, becoming steady, becoming a man who doesn't break under pressure because he no longer lives under that illusion. So if this resonated with you, stay. There's more coming. This is just beginning. This is just the beginning of rebuilding. And if you're walking through collapse right now, you're not walking alone. I'll see you on the next one. I love you all. Keep safe and look after yourself. God bless.